The ghost of the Hammersmith Cemetery in the early 1800s, the quiet streets of Hammersmith, London, were shrouded in an unsettling mist, both literal and metaphorical. As a young journalist, I had just begun my career, eager to uncover stories that would captivate the public's imagination. Little did I know that my first assignment would pull me into a world of shadows and specters, into a chilling tale that would haunt me forever. It all started with whispered rumors of a ghostly figure wandering the grounds of Hammersmith Cemetery. By day, it was a place of peace, where mourners visited their lost loved ones, but as dusk fell, the cemetery took on a more sinister persona. There were tales of a ghostly apparition, a tall figure draped in white, wandering among the tombstones and sending shivers down the spines of all who crossed its path. The locals were terrified. Some claimed the ghost was the restless spirit of a man who had taken his own life and was buried in unconsecrated ground, cursed to roam for eternity. Others swore it was a vengeful spirit, a woman wronged in life, seeking retribution from beyond the grave. Whatever the case, sightings were becoming more frequent and more alarming. As an intrepid reporter, I decided to investigate these claims myself. Armed with nothing more than a notebook and a flickering lantern, I ventured into the cemetery one moonless night. The air was cold and damp, and the trees swayed ominously in the chilling wind. The flicker of my lantern cast eerie shadows across the gravestones, each one a silent sentinel in the dark. I was not alone. Others had gathered, drawn by the tales of the ghost, some out of curiosity, others with more nefarious intentions. The bravest among them had armed themselves, intent on capturing or confronting the spectral menace. But as the night wore on and the clock struck midnight, an uneasy silence settled over the cemetery. Every creak and rustle of the wind seemed amplified, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over us all. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. At first, it was nothing more than a pale silhouette, gliding silently among the graves. The crowd gasped in unison as the apparition drew closer, its features coming into sharper focus. It was tall and thin, draped in what appeared to be a flowing shroud, its face obscured by shadows. Fear surged through me, and my heart pounded in my chest as the specter moved with an ethereal grace, seeming to float above the ground. A woman near me screamed, a sound that pierced the night like a dagger. Her cry sent a ripple of panic through the crowd, and people began to scatter in every direction, their courage evaporating in an instant. In the chaos, a shot rang out. The sharp crack of a pistol echoed through the cemetery, followed by a low, guttural moan. My lantern fell to the ground, and in the dim light, I saw the ghostly figure stagger and fall, crumpling to the earth like a marionette with its strings cut. For a moment, time stood still. The air was heavy with the acrid smell of gunpowder, and an eerie silence enveloped us. Slowly, we approached the fallen figure, fear mingling with a morbid curiosity. It was then that we discovered the unthinkable. The ghost was no phantom but a man, dressed in a white sheet. He lay motionless on the ground, a dark pool of blood spreading beneath him. The horror of what had transpired hit me like a wave, leaving me breathless. This man, whoever he was, had met a tragic end, mistaken for a specter, a victim of the hysteria that had gripped Hammersmith. But who was he? And why had he donned the guise of the ghost? The man who had been mistaken for a ghost was identified as Thomas Millwood, a local bricklayer. His widow, Mary, was inconsolable, devastated by the sudden and senseless loss of her husband. As I spoke with her, she revealed that Thomas had been returning home from work that night, wearing his usual white bricklayer's clothes, when he had been mistaken for the ghostly apparition that had haunted the cemetery. I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of guilt and responsibility for what had happened. I had been there, a witness to the panic and confusion that had led to Thomas's death. But there were still so many unanswered questions. Why had Thomas chosen to wander through the cemetery in such an outfit, knowing full well the rumors that surrounded it? And who was the person who had fired the fatal shot? The man responsible for Thomas's death was Francis Smith, a local resident who had taken it upon himself to hunt down the ghost. I managed to track him down, and he agreed to speak with me, although he was clearly shaken by the events of that fateful night. Francis was a man tormented by guilt. "I thought I was protecting my community," he said, his voice trembling. "I truly believed it was the ghost. I never wanted to harm anyone." He described the growing hysteria in Hammersmith, How tales of the ghost had spread like wildfire, fueled by reports of attacks and sightings. People were terrified, he explained. No one felt safe. I just wanted to put an end to it. His words painted a picture of a community on edge, driven to desperation by fear and superstition. But as I listened to Francis, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, that the ghost of Hammersmith was not merely a product of overactive imaginations. Determined to uncover the truth, I began interviewing witnesses who claimed to have seen the ghost. Each account was more chilling than the last. A young woman spoke of being chased through the cemetery by the specter, her screams echoing in the night. An elderly man swore he had seen the ghost vanish into thin air, leaving only a trail of frost in its wake. The stories were varied and often contradictory, but they shared a common thread, an overwhelming sense of terror and unease. The ghost was not just a figure of folklore, it was a palpable presence, one that seemed to feed off the fear it inspired. As I delved deeper into these accounts, I stumbled upon a curious detail. Many of the sightings had occurred on nights when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, as if the ghost preferred to move under the cover of darkness. This realization only added to the mystery, raising more questions than it answered. In my quest for answers, I sought out the local historian, Mr. Edward Collins, a man who knew more about the cemetery and its inhabitants than anyone else. His small, dusty study was filled with books and papers chronicling the history of Hammersmith. Mr. Collins was a man of facts and logic, skeptical of ghost stories and superstitions. Yet, as he showed me the records of those buried in the cemetery, a pattern began to emerge. Several of the graves belonged to individuals who had died under mysterious or violent circumstances, their deaths shrouded in rumors of betrayal and revenge. One name, in particular, caught my attention: Emily Blackwood, a young woman who had died 30 years earlier under suspicious circumstances. Her death had been ruled a suicide, but whispers of foul play persisted. As I read about Emily's tragic end, a chill ran down my spine. Could she be the ghost that haunted Hammersmith? Was she seeking justice from beyond the grave? The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, but the full picture remained elusive. As night fell once more over Hammersmith, the ghost's presence seemed to grow stronger, its grip on the town tightening with every passing day. I knew that to uncover the truth, I would have to return to the cemetery, to face the darkness that lurked within its walls. But as I prepared for the confrontation, a nagging sense of dread gnawed at me. This was no ordinary ghost story. It was a tale of vengeance and sorrow, of secrets buried deep beneath the earth. And whatever lay at the heart of it all was more terrifying than I had ever imagined. As dusk descended, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. Armed with a lantern and a notebook, I entered the cemetery once more, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The moon was hidden behind a veil of clouds, casting the cemetery into a shadowy gloom. Every nerve in my body was on edge as I made my way through the rows of tombstones, each one a silent witness to the secrets buried beneath. The night was eerily quiet, the only sounds the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of leaves in the wind. My heart raced as I approached the spot where Thomas Millwood had fallen, the memory of that tragic night still fresh in my mind. I paused, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon me. The stories of Emily Blackwood and the others who had met untimely ends echoed in my thoughts. What had brought these restless spirits back from the grave? And what connection did they have to the man who had died just days ago? Just as my resolve began to waver, a cold breeze swept through the cemetery, extinguishing my lantern. I fumbled in the darkness, my fingers trembling as I tried to relight it. But before I could, a soft, mournful wail rose from the shadows, sending chills down my spine. My heart pounded as I turned towards the source of the sound, and there it was, the ghostly figure, more distinct than ever. It glided towards me, its form illuminated by an ethereal glow. The air around it seemed to crackle with a palpable energy, a force that sent shivers through me. For a moment, I was frozen, unable to move or speak. The ghost stopped just a few feet away, its face still obscured in shadow. It reached out a hand, skeletal and pale, as if beckoning me to come closer. Gathering what courage I could muster, I took a step forward, my voice barely a whisper. "Who are you?" I asked, my words trembling in the cold night air. The ghost remained silent, its presence both terrifying and mesmerizing. But as I stood there, I noticed something peculiar. The ground beneath the apparition was disturbed, the earth freshly turned. It was as if the specter had emerged from the grave itself. Driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, I moved closer, examining the disturbed soil. There, partially buried beneath the dirt, was a tattered piece of cloth, a shroud similar to the one the ghost wore. My heart raced as I realized that this could be a clue, a piece of the puzzle that might explain the haunting. As I reached down to retrieve the cloth, the ghost let out another mournful wail, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. My hand shook as I pulled the shroud from the ground, revealing a name embroidered on it, Emily Blackwood. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. This was no ordinary haunting, it was a message, a cry for justice from beyond the grave. Emily's spirit was trapped, bound to the cemetery by the circumstances of her death. But how did this connect to Thomas Millwood's tragic end? And what role did the other spirits play in this tale of vengeance? With the cloth in hand, I turned to leave the cemetery, my mind racing with possibilities. But as I did, the ghost let out a final, blood-curdling scream. The sound reverberated through the night, echoing in the shadows like a dire warning. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet shifted, and I stumbled back, narrowly avoiding falling into a newly opened grave. The earth continued to tremble as if the cemetery itself was alive, reacting to the secrets I had uncovered. It was then that I understood the gravity of my situation. The ghosts of Hammersmith were not merely phantoms of the past, they were entangled in a dark web of deceit and betrayal that spanned generations. And I had only just begun to unravel the threads. With my heart pounding in my chest, I hurried from the cemetery, the ghost's mournful cries still echoing in my ears. The cloth in my hand was a key, a piece of evidence that could unlock the truth behind the haunting. But as I left the cemetery behind, a sense of foreboding settled over me. I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and that the ghosts of Hammersmith would not rest until their story was told. But whatever lay ahead, I was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting the darkest corners of the human soul. The next morning, I pored over every bit of information I had gathered. My small study was filled with notes, newspaper clippings, and sketches of the cemetery, each piece of evidence pinned to the wall like a detective's caseboard. The name Emily Blackwood was at the center of it all, surrounded by threads of connection that linked her to the other victims. My research revealed a dark chapter in Hammersmith's history. 30 years earlier, Emily Blackwood had been a young woman of some means, living with her family in the village. Her death, officially ruled a suicide, had always been shrouded in suspicion. Witnesses had claimed to see bruises on her body, marks that suggested she had met with foul play. Yet, without evidence, the case had been quietly swept under the rug, her death becoming just another whisper in the annals of history. But now it seemed her spirit had returned, joined by others who had met similar fates. As I delved deeper into the past, I discovered a string of mysterious deaths in the years following Emily's demise, each victim buried in the same cemetery, their stories forgotten until now. The deeper I dug, the more I began to uncover a disturbing pattern. There were whispers of a secret society operating in Hammersmith, a clandestine group that wielded significant influence over the town. Their members were rumored to be men of power, landowners, businessmen, and even members of the clergy, who met under the cover of darkness to discuss matters of mutual interest. Could this secret society be connected to the deaths? Had they silenced those who threatened to expose their machinations? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but it was the only theory that made sense. The cemetery, once a place of mourning, had become a graveyard of secrets, each tombstone a testament to lives cut short for reasons unknown. Determined to find answers, I sought out the help of Mr. Collins, the local historian. He was initially reluctant to speak of the society, but after some coaxing, he admitted that he had heard rumors of their existence. "They're a shadowy bunch," he said, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves were listening. "They've got their fingers in everything, and they'll do anything to keep it that way." His words only fueled my determination. If there was a secret society pulling the strings behind the scenes, then it was up to me to expose them. But as I pieced together the fragments of this dark puzzle, I realized that the ghosts of Hammersmith were more than just victims of a sinister conspiracy, they were the key to bringing their killers to justice. As night fell, I found myself drawn back to the cemetery, the weight of my discoveries heavy on my mind. This time, I was not alone. Several locals, drawn by tales of the ghost and the recent events, had gathered at the gates, their faces a mix of fear and fascination. With each step I took among the graves, I felt the air grow colder, the shadows deeper. The cemetery was alive with the sounds of the night, branches creaking in the wind, distant howls of animals, but beneath it all, there was a palpable tension, a sense that something terrible was about to unfold. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, echoing across the cemetery like a banshee's wail. The crowd gasped, and I spun around, searching for the source of the sound. There, in the distance, I saw it, a ghostly figure, more terrifying than before, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. The apparition glided towards us, its face a twisted mask of anguish and rage. The crowd scattered in panic, but I stood my ground, my heart pounding in my chest. The ghost paused a few feet from me, its eyes, dark, hollow voids, boring into mine. As if sensing my intent, it spoke, its voice a low, mournful whisper that chilled me to the bone. "Justice," it said, the word hanging in the air like a specter of its own. "Bring them justice." The ghost's plea reverberated in my mind as the apparition slowly faded, its form dissolving into the mist. The cemetery fell silent once more, the only sound the ragged breathing of those who had stayed behind. A terrifying revelation, but just as they were about to exact their revenge, a revelation struck me, a bone-chilling twist that made my skin crawl. I realized that the spirits, in their quest for justice, risked becoming the very monsters they sought to destroy. Their thirst for vengeance had grown beyond their control, threatening to consume not just Harrington, but the souls of the innocent as well. "Stop!" I shouted, stepping forward, my voice cutting through the ethereal din. "This is not the way. You mustn't let him turn you into what he feared most." For a moment, the spirits hesitated, their forms flickering as if caught between worlds. Emily turned towards me, her eyes searching mine for something beyond retribution. In that instant, I saw not a vengeful wraith, but a soul longing for peace. "We must not become them," I pleaded. "Let the truth be your justice, not violence." The words hung in the air, a fragile thread of hope amidst the darkness. Slowly, the spirits began to retreat, their anger dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Emily gave me a final, solemn nod before fading into the ether, her expression one of gratitude and release. The society's downfall. With the spirits gone, Harrington slumped to the floor, his face pale and drawn. I picked up the documents I had gathered and left him there, knowing that his reign of terror had come to an end. As I stepped into the night, the moonlight bathed the cemetery in a soft glow, the air clear and calm. The evidence I had collected was more than enough to expose the secret society's crimes, and with the spirit's aid, I knew I could bring them to justice. Over the following days, I worked tirelessly to unravel the web of corruption that had ensnared Hammersmith for so long. The truth spread like wildfire, igniting a public outcry that could not be silenced. As the society crumbled, its members faced trial for their deeds, their influence shattered by the weight of their sins. The ghosts of Hammersmith were finally laid to rest, their stories told, their vengeance sated. Months later, as I walked through the cemetery, I felt a profound sense of peace. The tombstones, once markers of tragedy, now stood as silent testaments to the resilience of the human spirit. The apparitions that had haunted the town had become a part of its lore, a reminder of the power of truth and the dangers of unchecked ambition. But even as I left the cemetery behind, I knew that the story of the Hammersmith ghost would linger in the shadows, a chilling tale of mystery, terror, and redemption. The spirits had found their justice, and I had found my calling as a storyteller, a guardian of truth in a world where darkness often hid in plain sight. And as the winds whispered through the trees, I could almost hear Emily's voice, a soft, haunting melody carried on the breeze. "Thank you," she seemed to say, her presence a comforting echo of a tale that would never truly be forgotten. The end.